into it.
Sure.
I was going to ask you to differentiate online between undergraduate and graduate programs. So as an example, I found a huge difference between when I was creating a master's or doctoral level and when I was creating something undergrad, and the concerns had to be different. And I then got to thinking about how does this impact the process of creating engagement?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because I think that for the most part, when I think about the differences between online education and traditional, course development for traditional classes, face-to-face classes, for the most part, you're differentiating between pedagogy and andragogy. So that there's differences between how adults learn, what they bring to the table, as opposed to what traditional 18 to 22, 24-year-old students will. Because I don't like to use the word blank slate, but they have a blanker slate than the adult students would. So that there's some scaffolding that you have to put in place for a traditional class than you wouldn't necessarily need to use for the adult student as well. So I think that even that, you could kind of stretch that analogy a little bit further with graduate level students. So there's even less scaffolding that you need to have in place for graduate level students, because the expectations are a lot more as far as, because they already have an undergraduate degree. So that there's some level of expectation, or a level of understanding, prerequisite understanding of the subject matter for the most part, even if their bachelor's degree, their undergraduate degree wasn't in the same discipline, they do have more of a general understanding of material, of how education works and so forth. So there's a lot less scaffolding in that sense to have to help those students to kind of get on board. But there's a lot of, it's a simple question, but it's a complex question in the sense that you can't necessarily put everybody under the same umbrella, because you might have students, graduate level students, taking on a class for the first time. You may have a student that just graduated with their bachelor's degree the previous semester, so that they're still in that mode of education, academic, and so forth. But you might have someone that's been out of school for 20 years. And so this is something that's, online education is new. They're a little bit rusty in the processes and so forth. So there's a lot of new things, even though they still have a bachelor's degree under the belt. And so there's a lot of those kinds of variables that you need to kind of consider when developing a course, so that you're kind of understanding, you're kind of anticipating all the struggles, all the challenges that different students may have, and some of the things that you may need to make sure that they have the support that they need. And I think that's the critical piece. Across the spectrum of students, is just making sure that students have the support that they need when they need it, regardless of whether they're an undergrad or graduate student. But there's certain unique things that graduate students definitely need, because of the level of the difference between an undergraduate education and a graduate education, being that there's going to be a lot more research involved in doing so. So there's a lot of that kind of support that is definitely necessary, and a lot of that needs to be clearly communicated as one is developing the curriculum for those courses.
Okay, I completely agree that the process of developing courses for undergraduate and graduate is remarkably different. Does this mean, this is a two-part question, does this mean that there is no single formula for course design in order to engage student attention? And is there anything that we could generalize about graduate or undergraduate course design to engage the learner?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes and no. I think that there's a certain amount of formulate what you need to in order to design a good course. I think that I do acknowledge and advocate that there are best practices for online course design. And I think that without knowing the students, but knowing the target students that you're trying to reach and you're trying to provide an educational experience for, I think that there's best practices where how you design a good discussion forum, how do you design a good research project and so forth, without even needing to really know, other than their adult students or graduate students or master's level students, those kinds of variables are helpful in designing the course, designing the curriculum to meet the course objectives. But I think also that there's a limit as far as how far you can go in the design phase of a course in order to meet the various needs of individual students. And I think that that's kind of where instructional design kind of hands off the baton to well-developed and well-trained online course instructors, where I think that it's very important that you have separate design training for subject matter experts to design a well-developed online course, but you also need to make sure that the person who is going to be teaching the course understands how they need to also, be on their feet as far as like, okay, well, there's this well-crafted discussion forum assignment, but it's not just that once the course has been designed, it just kind of automatically just kind of runs itself. There's a significant amount of ways in which the instructor needs to be trained on how to facilitate that discussion. What do they need to know if he or she needs to and help students kind of engage more in the content. If they see that because the variety of students that one may have for a course is going to be very different from time to time. So for one semester, the students may be very excited about the book of Hebrews, for example. The next time, they may not be near as excited about that subject matter as the students were before. So the instructor needs to kind of take that into consideration and being able to know what they need to do in order to get a heightened level of engagement and interaction with the course. So there's only a certain amount, I feel, that from a design perspective, getting the course designed before it's ever offered, there's definitely some best practices that one must follow in order to develop that course. But then you also need to make sure that whoever's going to be teaching the course is also well versed in how to how to lead that course, how to facilitate that course. What are some alternative things that they can do in order to, if this plan doesn't work, what can I do to make it work better, more effectively, just in case plan A kind of fizzles out.
Okay. I want to back up a second and get you to talk about why engaging remote learners is so critical. And where I'm going with this is going to be, how does this impact faculty workloads? So we agree that engagement must be there. I'd ask you to address that. But ultimately, when it comes down to resistance that we encounter with faculty, you'll hear them saying that it takes too much time. How do we address this?
Yeah, so I think that, that's a very general question as far as like different faculty. We have, at least in our institution, we have a variety of folks who teach for us. We have full-time faculty who teach as this is part of their workload, so it's loaded into their. So if they teach 12 hours per semester, this 3-hour class is included in their overall contract. That this is part of their workload. Mm-hmm. We also have others who agree that, okay, I have these 3 classes that I teach normally. I have to teach these or 4 classes normally. I will agree to have this as an overload, and they are contracted differently. So I think that, as far as, being able to, and I understand the resistance, I understand the pushback, because I think that, faculty for the most part, the teaching aspect is a critical part of that for the institution and for them as well as for students. but we all know that that's not the only responsibility that they have. They also have, they also have the research and writing. They also have multiple committee engagements that they're responsible for being participating in, and multiple of other different things. So we want to make sure that we're communicating to them very clearly that their time and their expertise is valued, and we do that by trying to, I think one of the best ways is to make sure that they are, they're compensated for that fairly, something that they are, that they agree upon. We don't want, and we also want to make sure that it's not something that they're flying blind in. So we want to make sure that we provide adequate training. We want to make sure that they're provided with the support that they need when they need it, so that it's not a part where they're teaching the course and they're just there by themselves, isolated and trying to have to figure things out for themselves. If students have issues with technology, we want to make sure that they know that they can contact our IT department directly, so that they don't have to think that the faculty member has to try to figure those kinds of things out. We want to make sure that the class, we want to make sure that we're fair to the faculty member, that we're saying, okay, we're contracting you to teach this course. This is what teaching this course means. It doesn't mean that you're IT tech support. It doesn't mean that you're trying to help them figure out that if they forgot their password, that you help them reset that. Those are things that our team will help them with, but we don't want them to feel that these other extracurricular types of things is part of their responsibility in teaching the course. And we try to communicate. I think it's important for us to communicate that to them very clearly up front in an orientation kind of format, so that they know these are my roles and responsibilities, and these are other team members' roles and responsibilities. And I can feel confident and comfortable saying, okay, hey, this is not my responsibility. This is your responsibility. I'm asking you to take care of that. And as a team, that's what the whole collaborative environment is supposed to be.
Okay. I want to go in two little directions. First of all, you made the statement that we can design good courses, but as you continued, you said you can't guarantee that the students in the first semester are like the students in the next, and so there's a constant adaptation.
Right.
Faculty must be going through. Okay. I've had faculty tell me that the amount of time it takes to deliver an online course, including the act of student engagement, is much greater than it is for face-to-face courses. I've always used as a rule of thumb that I can ask faculty for the same amount of time as they would deliver in a face-to-face, not more, but also not less in an online. This sounds like I'm putting a constraint onto the process of student engagement. Do you see it that way, or how do we balance the time load here?
Yeah, so I think it's like I said, I think the main thing is, it's very important that we clearly communicate to faculty, and be very transparent in the expectations that we have for them. One of the ways that we can do that is we can provide like an orientation. We provide training, so that an ongoing training and ongoing support, so that they don't feel overloaded, they don't feel overwhelmed, and they don't feel that the expectations on them are greater than what that are really expected from us as an institution. So, if we are talking to them about, what are the expectations that we have for you as an online faculty member? Mm-hmm. These are the things that we expect, but we also provide them with, examples of what that might look like. So it's going to look different from faculty member to faculty member, how they manage their time. And two, I mean, if you're the examples that you gave, that some say that it takes a lot more time. I've heard that too, and I think that depending on the person's personality or how, if they're a perfectionist, for example, they're probably more apt to take a lot more time doing certain things than perhaps maybe someone who doesn't have that same temperament. And so it's just a matter of trying to help them attain efficiencies where I had one faculty member who let me know that, the writing course that she was teaching took an inordinate amount of time to grade assignments, because she felt like that she had to make sure that she made comments on every grammatical mistake that the students were making. Like, you probably don't need to do that, and I think it's just a matter of being, in developing rapport with faculty, being able to talk to them, being able to develop relationships with them so that they feel free and open to be able to share those kinds of experiences that they're having, so that then you can kind of coach and guide them and help them see where they can increase their efficiencies as far as like lessening the time it takes them to grade, so that they're not that we want to decrease the amount of feedback, but I think that you have certain expectations of your students. If they're in a college level course, that there are certain things that they need to kind of be adult in, and saying, okay, well, rather than correcting every grammatical error, if that student is making that, a significant amount of, typographical, grammatical errors, you can refer them to the writing center, or you can refer them to other things that the student can take initiative and take ownership on, and say, okay, I'm an adult, I'm a college student, I need to be responsible for my own performance in this course, so I'm taking that initiative, I'm doing that on my own, rather than saying, okay, the faculty member has to now, do all this, make time and make themselves available to coaching that student, where those things should have been, as a prerequisite, those things should have been taken care of before they actually enrolled in the course. And that, I think that, as we try to help faculty understand and recognize their responsibility and what's not their responsibility, and some of the ways that we can kind of increase efficiencies and like offering feedback, I think that will help them see that it doesn't take as much time as they thought that it would, or that it's taking them, because they're duplicating, a lot of times that they're duplicating work that they don't really need to.
Yes. This takes a slightly different direction. I have always found, pretty well in every course I've created, that I've wanted faculty to use rubrics for assessment. And my argument was twofold. First of all, it reduces your workload, because a student can reflect upon what they've done in light of the rubric and makes it a bit easier.
Right.
The positive things is it reduces faculty time and it encourages student reflection. Do you make use of those?
Oh, absolutely. And we try to incorporate rubrics in every assignment, every gradable assignment that we have in our courses, because I think, like you said, I agree 100%. It reduces faculty workload. I also think it also creates a kind of a level of transparency with our students, so that the students aren't trying to guess, how their assignment's going to be graded and assessed. So, and it also makes it very consistent as far as whether, when it comes to at the end of the game, whenever you're trying to develop an assessment report, and it takes, I don't want to say it eliminates the subjectivity in grading, but it does create a heightened sense of objectivity to the grading. So especially if a course is being taught by several different faculty members, it really kind of helps the level of consistency in grading, so that the students are being assessed in a similar way, regardless of who's teaching the course, because they're using the same assignment rubric, they're using the same criterion by which they're being graded and so forth. So it does eliminate a lot of that. I also think it helps as far as aligning the assignments that we have and showing how they align with outcomes. And I think that that's a huge benefit as well. It eliminates a lot of not necessarily time for the faculty members per se, but as far as like at the end of an academic year, it can help as far as developing assessment, for the institution later on, where you say you take different artifacts from the course, and you can show, how each of those assignments were aligned with the outcomes and so forth, and seeing how well the course is performing against those outcomes.
Very true. Just hearing you talk, flashed back in my mind. At one point, I was coordinator for the English department at one of the local colleges. I had 65 sections of college English.
Goodness.
And you're like, how do you get this aligned? It
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
was a nightmare.
I can imagine. Oh,
Okay, now, the paper is about actively engaging the remote student. I'm trying not to backtrack, but why do you see that as so critical in comparison to the face-to-face classroom? And what would your key suggestions be to a faculty in order to become used to that idea?
yeah, I do think that engagement is critical in an online course, because I think that normally when anyone thinks of taking a class, one of the things that comes to mind is that they have this classroom experience where this ideally where, you know, the faculty is not lecturing, but I mean, where the entire class is up and engaged and contributing to a real rich, robust discussion. And I think that, you know, when you compare and contrast that to an online class, I think a lot of folks have in the back of their minds of what that is just someone in front of a computer screen, isolated, alone, doing their coursework by themselves.
Yes.
And I think that even though there's definitely a tension between, you know, why students take an online course. Mainly it's for convenience. Mainly it's because, you know, that student can't move away to you know, enroll in the program that they want, or they work full time and they can't take classes during the day, or they're you know, they're an adult student and they feel awkward, you know, taking classes with you know, traditional 18 to 22-year-old students, whatever the case may be. But I think that they still want that level of connection, or they want that level of community where they're you know, it really spurs the you know, the experience. It helps them to understand the material, and they want to be able to talk through, you know, and process and reflect on the material. And I think, yeah, you can do that. You can do that in a two-dimensional discussion forum where you're just offering a discussion prompt. Students are able to interact, and you can, if designed well, the discussion forum is a huge you know, benefit to the course. And I'm not trying to denounce that at all. I think it's the bread and butter, I think, of an online course. But in order to kind of take it up a level, to allow for students to be able to maybe interact and engage synchronously through like a Zoom conversation or what have you, helps tremendously. Students are able to understand and look at each other's face. They see their facial expressions. They can hear and listen to, you know, different how someone is speaking, their inflection, their intonation, and so forth. Right. And there's so much nonverbal communication that is communicated that you don't pick up on in the text unless they're using all caps, and you know that maybe right. Someone's angry or they accidentally, you know, have the caps lock on or something, whatever. But there's so much more to the communication process than just the written word, and I think that that's something that is very important. But yeah, it's the convenience factor, but yet there's that, you know, level of, you know, connectivity, connection, community that students need and need that in their course as well. And there's a lot of different ways to do that without, you know, students are busy, faculty are busy, but just creating some time where they have either as a large group, or you can have virtual office hours where you can host either a single group, or if that's, sometimes that can be a little awkward as well. So if you can have like a virtual office hour where it's like a small group of students with maybe 2 or 3, and being able to talk to them about a subject, you know, that you're talking about that week is helpful. Something I've been doing the last couple of years is I host a meet and greet first evening of class, where I just take the opportunity to invite students to a Zoom session. We talk about the syllabus, we talk about the, you know, the expectations of the course, and just basically just get to know one another, introduce ourselves to each other, and just have an informal time of just really, talking. And I found that to be tremendously helpful in the sense that before I started doing that, I would just, send out a welcome message. Hey, welcome to the class. This is my name. This is why I'm interested in teaching the course, blah, blah, blah. And for the most part, I didn't really get any questions. It was just very, I didn't really get that much feedback from them. Well, once I started posting this and recording it so that it's available to those students who weren't able to attend, I felt much more connected to the students. I felt the students were much more connected to me, and with the other students, they felt a lot freer to ask a lot of questions that I wouldn't have gotten if I hadn't done that. So I think that those kinds of things, I think they're small, they're minimal investment, but I think they reap a lot of really good dividends.
I think that's a really important point. My experience, and it sounds like yours as well, has been if I can move a faculty forward in a small increment, there's usually a big payback. So as an example, one of the things, it took me quite a while to do it, faculty resisted, office hours, where I became very increasingly insistent that you have to do this. Had a terrific effect on the students, no big issue for the faculty. The point is, I think the incremental steps was the way to go. If you try and take a faculty member from never taught online before to all of a sudden you're thrown in it, as we are during this COVID era, it's too much. But by moving them forward an incremental step, you can have a positive effect on engagement of your learners.
Yeah, I think, and I would agree 100%. I think that you just have to, I think it all goes back to just having that rapport, establishing that rapport and relationship with the faculty so that, you're not coming across as like a top-down, initiative where, okay, here's 16 new things that you need to do in the next time that you teach an online course. There might be some zealous faculty that are go-getters that will say, yeah, I'll take that as a challenge, and that'll be my to-do list, and I'll be able to do that. But there's going to be others, I would say the majority, that would be very, very overwhelmed with that, and just be overwhelmed with that. But if you're just you're committed to move the needle, small steps at a time, I think that you're going to help the faculty member. They're not going to feel overwhelmed. They're going to be, they love teaching. So that's going to be something that they're always going to be wanting to improve or enhance the way that they do things. And so they'll take that as a challenge. They'll take, and then the nice thing about that is if they do something like that and it was a positive experience for them, they'll be your champions, the next time when you're, faculty development or something like that, and you say, hey, you're trying to introduce a couple other things, and that person will say, hey, this was my experience. I didn't think I could do 5 or 6 things, but I did this one thing, and this was the result. And that will really turn the corner for a lot of other folks who might be resistant or hesitant to want to try something new. So if you can get faculty, if you can get their peers excited about that, and they encourage one another, it's a bigger win than for an administrator to say, hey, you need to do this, and this is why you need to do this. You get the peers excited about something, they'll be much more apt to want to try it themselves.
Yes. Sounds a little bit sneaky, really. And I know I did it all the time. We had a modular program in the undergraduate focused on Christian theology. And the thing about it was 5 weeks for 4 hours a week. In other words, 20 hours, as opposed to 20 to 30. And the faculty were always saying, I cannot deliver a course in that time frame. My reaction to that was, how are you delivering the course? What are you doing in the classroom? And the answer was obvious. We're lecturing and discussing. So, well, why not remove the lecture? And that horrified look on their face. I got 2 faculty to do it. And they came back announcing to their peers that they had done more in the course than they've ever done before, and the students were more satisfied.
Wow.
It was a huge step forward. And all of a sudden, I had what I wanted, the faculty walking down the hall saying happy things about online learning. And that largely became the model when COVID hit. They adapted the whole undergraduate program. So get the lectures down somehow, and let's use the video time for the interaction.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think because if you can remove, because I mean there's so much more involved in the lecture. I mean faculty vary on how they lecture, whether they lecture for an hour and a half straight, or if they have time, they may start speaking for like 15 minutes, cut that up, and then have discussion, interaction, things like that. So if you're able to minimize the talk time of the faculty member, just kind of dispersing information and having opportunities for the interaction time, that's a huge win.
I think it really was for us. We talked once before about methodologies that work in online learning. And we touched on the idea that these transfer back to the classroom. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I've had many times where I've worked with faculty in developing their online class, full-time faculty that work at our university, and they've given me feedback that a lot of the best practices, pedagogical best practices that we used in developing their online classes and what they were using to teach the online class, they were able to actually transfer into their face-to-face courses. And I think, as I've seen, as I've noticed, and I've studied and read and researched, when we think about traditional faculty, we think of scholars that are experts in their particular discipline, whether that be psychology, theology, whatever, what have you. And you think about their graduate, their PhD work. They're taught to be researchers. They're taught to be researching in their particular area and being able to write academic articles, monographs, or what have you. For the most part, it's very rare that you'll find someone in those disciplines that have had coursework or workshops or any other kind of course on pedagogy, on best practices in pedagogy. So they understand their material like the back of their hand, but they have never been taught, for the most part, on how to teach that material to others who do not necessarily understand all the nuances involved in that upper level training that they've had.
Right.
So I think when we have faculty that go through online training, part of that process and inherent is those pedagogical best practices. And so that's something that is new to them, and it's something that they latch onto. And when they get it, it's like, oh my goodness, this is really powerful in my online class, but my goodness, this is transferable in how I teach, in my face-to-face courses as well. So there's a significant amount of overlap, I believe, in both modalities and as far as pedagogy is concerned. And then when folks get that, they get really excited about how that can actually, transform the way that they teach in their face-to-face courses as well.
I would agree. I've seen that. I was quite pleased to see this. Professors in the early stage that I worked with ended up asking if they could use their online course, which was well instructionally designed, and have it copied over to their face-to-face course. So they wanted to use all of the resources they put together for the online to enhance face-to-face. They took out all the forums, so those discussions happened live, but pedagogy was themed. I was rather amazed. It makes you wonder a bit. Given the spot we are at, the instructional design field has had a long history. There seems to be general agreement that we should be using something systematic in our processes. Now with the advent of COVID and the fact that we're all online, suddenly it seems that online learning is no longer a boutique. It's now made the step to mainline. The question becomes, what happens after this? Assuming COVID goes away, we've now taken all of our faculty online.
Mhm.
Do you see this as a revolution in education?
I do, in the sense that I think that now, I think before COVID, I think that there was a kind of a mystery behind how, or a lot of presuppositions involved in what online education was. If the faculty members were, directly involved in developing or teaching or online courses. So there was always this, they had something in their mind when they pictured online education. I
Mhm.
think now, and I think I don't think that maybe it's uh, an initial revolution as far as like education is concerned, but I think it's going to be, a, I've, at least from my perspective, I see it as kind of still a little bit of a rocky road in a sense, because unfortunately, COVID didn't announce itself that they were going to, transfer all of our traditional classes into a remote format. We didn't have much notice. So that was unfortunate in the sense that that we had to quickly take a lot of traditional courses and put them up in our learning management system and help the faculty being able to teach that very quickly. So we didn't have the luxury of introducing them to best practices in online or hybrid education. We had to get their content up so that they could teach it within a week's notice. So
Mhm.
we talk about hundreds of classes being able to do that very quickly. And we were very cautious in our communication with faculty that this is not online education. This is virtual education. This is remote education. But we were very careful to make sure that they did not associate what we were doing with online education, because we didn't want to further stigmatize online education. It's like, oh, it's just something that we can just quickly throw together and it works just fine. We were very cautious to let them know that online in faculty development, talking to them about the differences between online education and,
Mhm.
and remote education. And so now, I think though that's one of the main, I think, roadblocks is, okay, that there's a difference. But now that faculty have experienced that, and maybe some of them experience something similar or very different during the summer, but now that the fall semester is upon us and we're about a month or so into it, I think that faculty are starting to really um, understand and at least have a more educated um, decision on where they fall as far as what the value of online education is. And I think that they are starting to see that this is something that really, if we invest it, if we understand and know how to deliver content effectively online, that there's the net by which we can cast for students is much broader than they ever thought would be possible. And I think that
Very true.
as we continue to kind of preach that, I think that and if we continue to kind of provide support, provide additional training for how they can continue to enhance, like we talked about earlier, just gradually moving the needle. Don't overload them with a bunch of, technology, shiny buttons and things like that. Get them to where they, keeping it simple, making sure that if they want to try technology, that it fits within the course, where it's not going to be something that's going to be a disruption rather than a help to a particular assignment or a particular activity that they want to introduce and try in their course. I think that the less problems that you have or potential problems that you introduce to them, the better that it's going to be for them, and the more that they're going to champion the cause, and the more they're going to see beneficial, and the more that they're going to want to try even newer things later on, and seeing how, hey, I taught this course for my traditional class, and I also had some students that are in, a Zoom session. Wow, this is pretty effective. I don't see much difference in engagement between the two. The students that are beaming in here from Zoom, feel very comfortable interacting and engaging with the students in the classroom, hey, why don't we just keep doing something like this? It seems very like it's working out really well, even after the virus, after COVID, post-COVID, we can continue doing this. And I think that that's probably a conversation that I know we are. I mean, I think that a lot of people are going to start having is,
Yes.
rather than going back to business as usual, maybe this was kind of a disruptive technology or pedagogy that we needed to kind of jumpstart some additional things and really helping us attract more students.
I would agree with you. Now, with the students themselves, based upon student evaluations, what have your students been saying about engagement in the course? And are there aspects of the course that they've particularly pointed at to say that was effective?
Yeah, I think that for the most part, if I was to generalize that, I would think that a lot of the positive comments, that students make are more geared toward how the instructor was present and how the instructor was engaged in the course, as opposed to the negative comments are kind of the opposite of that. That the instructor wasn't present, or the instructor somehow wasn't engaged in the course, where they didn't get very good feedback on their assignments, or the turnaround time with grading the assignments was pretty long, or they emailed a question to the instructor and it took too long for them to get back to them. So I think in general terms, I think faculty presence, faculty engagement in the course is something that's really important, that the students, at least the students are communicating that those two things are very, very significant as far as their evaluation of how they see the course going.
Right. Okay. My next one is really focused on the experience we've all had, and that is you stand up in a classroom one day and say, everybody, we're all going online. We're all going to be technically mediated from here on in. When you're facing that crew, never done it before, what do you tell them about the importance of engagement? And what tips do you give them on how to build engagement with students?
Yeah, so I think basically it all comes down to just making sure that we keep it simple. So trying not to, we want them to think out of the box, but we also want to make sure that they're comfortable where they're stepping out of the box from. So, I just try to make sure that we're communicating to the faculty and asking them questions like what they do in their face-to-face classes. And we're trying to help them, how do you establish engagement in your traditional class? What are some of the things that you do to kind of, break the ice with students in your face-to-face class, so that they feel comfortable and confident, being vulnerable in your class, so that when you're talking about a topic and you're discussing something, students feel comfortable raising their hand and contributing to that discussion. So trying to get them to, I really wanted to make sure that we helped faculty think of their transitioning into a remote learning environment, that it isn't as different as they think that it may be. So trying to help them, not necessarily this is a different way of teaching, this is a different way of instruction, it's a different modality of delivering what you already do. So trying to help them to kind of understand that, because I think that was a big roadblock, is that they thought, oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to learn how to teach in a different way. It's like, no, not really. I mean, you might have to learn how to do some things differently, but not necessarily teaching. I mean, best teaching strategies work cross modalities. So whatever you do as far as how you start a discussion, or how you play devil's advocate in a conversation like that, those are some of the things that will still transfer into a remote asynchronous environment too.
Just pick up on it's a different modality. The paper I have in the book that we're publishing references Garrison and Chickering and the principles of effective post-secondary education, and then adapts those directly to the distributed learning environment. My goal, as you said, was to not say this is different. It's what you have always done is good. Now let's change the modality.
Right, right, exactly. And I think one of the things that's frustrating, I mean, that can be frustrating, is the asynchronous environment. So take for compare and contrast an in-class discussion where you have a faculty member that might be talking, and then all of a sudden they provide a prompt for in-class discussion, and you might get a few students to engage in that discussion right away. So there's that give and take, that give and go in a live environment that can produce a very rich discussion and a very robust, lively engagement, and everybody in the class can benefit from that, even if they're not contributing in the sense that they're asking the questions or they're talking in that discussion. So a class of 30, maybe you get 5, just generalized.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that if a faculty member says, well, that's very frustrating because you can't duplicate that in an online environment. Yeah, you can't. I mean, in an asynchronous online environment, no, you can't duplicate that. You can't mirror that same experience in an online environment. But don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, in the sense that you can develop, but take advantage of the other. What are some of the positives that you can do in an online environment that you couldn't do in a synchronous traditional face-to-face class?
Mm-hmm.
So it's asynchronous. So that means a lot of things. Number one, the students will all contribute. You won't just have a fraction of the class that's going to be contributing to that discussion. And you might say, well, the students that are in the class that didn't contribute are not prepared, they're lazy, or whatever. That's not necessarily the case. There might be some who need time to process information, and they're not really best suited to, just speak. They may be introverted, they may just take extra time. So now you're giving them an opportunity in this new environment to be able to think and to be able to process and to be able to maybe elaborate a lot more in writing that they wouldn't be able to do in that synchronous environment. And they have more time to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And then you get more student engagement by allowing them the opportunity to be able to reflect and reply to other students, and the faculty has the opportunity then to also take a few of those and ask them for elaboration, perhaps maybe play devil's advocate, perhaps even point them to other resources that they might need in order to develop and kind of flesh out that discussion a little bit further. Mm-hmm. And so the fact that we have an entire week to kind of flesh out a few things, I think is a one way that we can kind of tell faculty, hey, even though you can't duplicate something, doesn't necessarily mean that it's subpar or it's not as good as it would be in a traditional face-to-face environment. Mm-hmm. Having those kinds of things in your toolbox will really help, I think, alleviate a lot of that kind of pushback and anxiety that faculty may have, that that they're going to be very limited in what they can do in their online course.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you fully. I found that with my faculty that the pushback largely disappears once they get involved. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you're in the same situation, but I've had courses with 90% of the students either, and we're in Canada. If I say outside the geographical area, that's a big area all around the world. Mm-hmm. And so while we could do things like Zoom, we couldn't hope that everyone in the world would be able to tune in at the same time. Nevertheless, we would still do them and then post them for students and provide the opportunity for asynchronous discussion to go along with it. And in the discussions themselves, I found it was more difficult to shut them down than it was to get them going. Right. Once the students catch on, away they go. Away they go.
Exactly.
I see our time is just about over. Would you have any final comments for us?
No, I just think, I mean, I think a lot of trying to help, you know, if we're in a situation like this, we didn't design or expect or ask that the COVID pandemic came across. But I think that, you know, there's two ways of looking at it. One, we can say that the glass is half empty or half full. And I just think that our general perspective and you know, how we look at challenges that come our way really helps us to be prepared for situations like this. So I think that you know, once this pandemic is over, I don't think that we should just automatically think, okay, well, this crisis is we've gotten past this. We won't think about the next crisis until it comes. I think that would be the wrong takeaway to get from this. I think as educators, as administrators in our respective universities and so forth, and seminaries, we need to take this as a wake-up call. And I think that we need to, in all of our campuses, we need to take online education very seriously. And I hope and pray that this pandemic was a wake-up call. But in case if it wasn't, or if it wasn't enough of a wake-up call, I just think that we just need to make sure that the voices in our institutions that are working directly in online education have that opportunity to be able to continue to say, okay, we have overcome this. These are some steps that we need to learn everything that we can from our faculty, from our students, from our staff members, that, you know, what did we learn from this, and how can we use what we've learned from this to be proactive and prepared for the next crisis, whatever that would be, so that we can be, you know, so that if something like this happens again, it's not a matter of, okay, oh my goodness, this is, you know, we've got to, we're scrambling, trying to piece together things to make something work, rather than, okay, this happened, okay, Monday we'll have plan B is a very seamless process. We were prepared for this. It's just a matter of doing this, and we're ready to go. Because I think that we need to serve our students well, and that's part of preparing ourselves to serve our students well. And hopefully that this is, if that's the main takeaway that we kind of get from going through this crisis, is that we'll be better prepared for the next one that comes around.
That's terrific. I'd like to thank you very much for this discussion. I quite enjoyed it.
Well, I was very pleased to and very honored to be a part of it. And thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.